Good evening, I'm John Carter and welcome to Poland Daily. 4 years ago today, Andrzej Duda became the president of Poland. The Law and Justice Party candidate defeated the Civic Platform Party candidate in the second round with more than 518,000 more votes than his opponent.
Andrzej Duda has completed the fourth year of his presidency. Last year, the Polish president met with the US president in the White House twice.
I'm trying to fulfill my campaign promises from 2015. I'm happy that Poland is changing for the better. This was the main goal, to change hard-working people's lives and make Polish families' lives better. Those people are at the heart of my thoughts and my work. I'm fighting for the matters of ordinary people who don't have privileges and huge benefits, who have to work hard for their money and then a small pension.
The president submitted nearly 30 projects of draft law, including the reinforcement of the retirement age of 60 years for women and 65 years for men, increasing the tax-free allowance, and introducing help for people who took out loans in the franc currency. Politicians have mixed opinions on Duda's term of office.
When comparing Duda to the former presidents, especially to Bronisław Komorowski, we have to say that he makes less blow than his forerunner. He feels good in the international environment, he speaks many languages, he knows how to behave. But when it comes to Polish trade, it's obvious that he's not an independent president, but the president of the Law and Justice Party.
The Injustice Party MP Jan Mosiński has a different view. In his opinion, Andrzej Duda is a true statesman.
He's a good president, he represents Poland in a good way. He doesn't make gaffes like his forerunner, Mr. Komorowski. We can't even compare these two.
At the beginning of August, the leader of the Law and Justice Party said that we have an amazing president who should be elected for another term of office. His term of office will end in 2020, and so far everything indicates that he's going to be running for re-election.
The annual Polish pilgrimage from Warsaw to Jasna Góra, the sacred hill in Częstochowa in the south of Poland, has begun. Some of the pilgrims joined the 308th pilgrimage of the Pauline Fathers Church at Długo Street, and others the academic pilgrimage of the 17th groups, which was inaugurated by a solemn blessing at the Church of St. Anna in Warsaw's Old Town.
The 17th groups began their march under the slogan "Spirit gives life." Every year there is a similar number of people in our pilgrimage, around 1,500. We're part of the 308th Warsaw pilgrimage, but as the 17th groups, under our own name. Among the pilgrims there are families with little children who are not afraid of marching for 8 days.
Idę po pierwsze, żeby ładować moje akumulatory, po drugie idę z dzieckiem.
I'm going to charge my batteries and show my kids that there are still values in this world which are worth believing in, because this is what really matters, to have values in this contemporary, often faithless world. Why should we live our lives without any sense to it? Of course you can, but I think that with the Christian hope and faith that we will be resurrected, living is easier.
My, jako chrześcijanie na zmartwychwstanie, żyje się po prostu łatwiej.
Idziemy na Jasną Górę i to...
We're going to Jasna Góra and we wait all year for this.
Czeka na ten moment po prostu.
Which pilgrimage is this for you?
Nie wiem, chyba
I'm not sure, 6th or 7th.
To ciekawe, ja pochodzę z Częstochowy.
I'm actually from Częstochowa, so you could say I'm going back home. The pilgrimage definitely gives me more strength than it takes. The pilgrims will reach Jasna Góra on August 14th, the day before the celebrations of the Assumption of Mary.
On Monday, 88 out of 100 US senators signed a letter to the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo. The letter urges Pompeo to put pressure on Poland on the issue of restitution of property of Holocaust victims. In May last year, President Trump signed the S-447 Justice for Uncompensated Survivors Today Act, concerning the return of property of Holocaust victims to their rightful owners or their heirs. But its provisions are mainly symbolic and declarative.
I think the question of Act 447 has already been discussed repeatedly. There is no danger in terms of us having to pay off Jewish communities in the United States of America. These issues have also been regulated in bilateral agreements, as far as Poland and the United States of America are concerned. I say this in relation to the Verification Commission. So these indemnification agreements also regulated all claims, and I think the topic is closed. But some senators want to make a name for themselves and signal their presence in some way. At present, I believe that this topic is, in my opinion, closed. There is no threat to Poland regarding any claims from Jewish communities.
The primary elections in Argentina will take place on August the 11th. And despite not having much influence on who the main presidential candidates in the general election in late October will be, experts say it will be the first test of the level of support for incumbent right-wing President Mauricio Macri's economic reforms.
The markets have reacted nervously to opinion polls showing Macri trailing to his main rival Alberto Fernandez and his Peronist faction. Many suspect that the running mate of Fernandez, the more left-wing radical Cristina Kirchner, will politically dominate Argentina again if Fernandez wins the election. Macri recently took his re-election campaign to a cattle show in Buenos Aires, reaching out to the agriculture sector in a bid to narrow the gap to his opponent. Dear Argentines, things are in motion and will pick up once we get out of this political uncertainty, once we have confirmed that we're going forward and not going back to the past. Now more than ever, we want to live in a real democracy, without authoritarianism, without arrogance, with no mafia and with the truth. In a country that fights drug trafficking, where public works start and conclude, where money that has been stolen because of corruption is recovered. That is the Argentina we want and that we're building. Because the Argentina that we want isn't in the past, it's in the future. The Argentinian presidential election will take place on October 27th.
Yesterday, Italy's Senate approved a tougher law on immigration, targeting the NGO vessels trying to disembark migrants in the country. The new decree allows for captains of NGO vessels to be arrested if they ignore orders to stay away from Italian waters, and calls on naval authorities to seize vessels automatically if they attempt to disembark migrants against orders.
The decree has been drawn up by the country's Minister of the Interior, Matteo Salvini. The new law will increase the fines for NGO vessels who try to force their way into Italian ports from 50,000 to €1 million. Protesters gathered in front of Parliament during the vote, arguing that Italy must take in a larger number of African migrants. However, the Italian public doesn't seem to agree with that sentiment. Salvini's popularity has soared on the back of his uncompromising anti-migrant position. His Lega party has broken a new record in a poll by the Winpoll agency. It showed that 39% of voters intended to vote for the party, more than doubling its share of votes at last year's parliamentary election. Nevertheless, African migrants keep making the journey over the Mediterranean Sea to Italy. On the same day the Senate approved the new law, a video of a so-called ghost landing in Sicily appeared online. Ghost landing is the name given to the phenomenon of wooden boats or dinghies with migrants arriving to European shores without being intercepted by the Coast Guard or authorities. The incoming president of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, argues that the EU will need to adopt a new common asylum law, based on countries accepting EU migrant quotas.
I want to propose a new pact for migration and asylum because I think we need a new and fresh view and start on migration. We know that migration will not go away. It is inherent in a globalized world. When it comes to burden sharing, yes, indeed, I think we need a new kind of burden sharing. And I'm aware of the fact that countries like Italy, like Greece, like Spain are in an exposed geographical position. So we have to take that into account, and solidarity is needed.
Germany has taken the lead in redistributing migrants across Europe. On Sunday, an NGO vessel carrying 40 migrants that had been denied access to Italian ports was allowed to dock in Malta after a German intervention and negotiations with the European Commission. It appears that the Visegrad Group's proposition to close Europe's maritime borders for migrant vessels is so far falling on deaf ears.
Thank you very much for joining me here this evening at Poland Daily. I'm John Carter. Stay tuned for Poland Daily weather. That's followed by the business, then the culture, history, and finally the travel.
Good evening and welcome to Poland Daily Weather. Tonight we can expect showers in the north, southwest and central regions of the country, with thunderstorms in Katowice, Kraków and Kielce. The temperatures will vary between 14 to 18 degrees. The southeast will see partly cloudy skies and temperatures of 18 degrees in Lublin and Rzeszów. Tomorrow will be a rainy day in most areas in the country. We can expect thunderstorms in Wrocław, Opole, Katowice, Kielce, Lublin and Rzeszów, and temperatures of 26 to 28 degrees. The seacoast will be much cooler at 23 degrees with slightly overcast skies. In the next 3 days, the temperatures will vary between 19 to 28 degrees. The rain clouds should move towards the west, and by Saturday we can expect slightly clouded skies in the central, southern, and western regions of the country. That is all for tonight. I invite you to join us for Poland Daily Business.
August 1st, 2019, Warsaw Stock Exchange announced its earnings call for second quarter, and we spoke about that with the Stocks Exchange chairman.
We positively surprised our analysts, so we are glad with the results, especially in the commodity market where we were growing double digit. Nobody expected that. We face challenging market environment in the financial markets, especially in equity cash trading and derivatives. We are still performing best in Europe, but still we have negative growth in our equity. When it comes to profitability, we have historically one of the highest EBITDA margin and net profit margins due to our very restrictive cost control. So we are basically happy with quarter two and the first half of this year.
How do you identify your growth areas for the Warsaw Stock Exchange?
Quarter two was quite important for our strategy, for our strategic initiatives. We initiated the GPW Growth Program. It's an educational program targeted for medium-sized enterprises, where we give a full-blown training on different managerial aspects, but of course with some focus on capital raising. So we hope that it will build up a IPO pipeline based on the alumni of this training program. It's done with various of partners, including ministries and other institutions, but also with the private sector. And the complete game changer is opening of our R&D center in Łódź, about 150 kilometers from Warsaw, where we will work on a new generation trading engine. It will be first time when a medium-sized exchange store builds up a trading system which is especially targeted for smaller exchanges, especially in the Central Eastern European region, but also in East Europe, Caucasian region and Middle East. And what we believe we will have kind of technological leapfrogging. So we will jump to newest technology. The system will be modular, very light, and in this aspect very competitive versus large systems developed and implemented by large exchanges. And pretty soon we hope we will be exporting those technologies worldwide.
Would you like to use the commercially available solution in that area?
No, we will build it from the scratch. We will not use any third-party licenses or something like this. We will build it on our own code or open source codes. The only portion of code we're gonna use are interfaces, as we want to keep the standardized interface as we have it now for as long as possible. So there will be plenty of time for our members, for our clients to adjust to the new system, and also would like to profit from the community which is around this standard fixed protocol. But we also, for the high frequency traders, will also develop a binary interface to make the latency and latency low and high frequency trading possible.
How do you see what is the preferred vision of the development of the Warsaw Stock Exchange in the next, say, 5 years from now?
Well, a year ago we outlined 20 plus strategic initiatives, and one by one we implement them. The building blocks of the strategy is diversification. We would like to have a more business line, including agriculture market and completely new design of our bonds market, etc. We also want to deepen our value chain in our core markets, especially by introducing new indexes, new derivatives, new products for our clients, more customized to different customer groups. And the third pillar is looking for more stable sources of revenues, being data. One initiative is fully devoted to data and technology. So currently we are too much exposed to the market conditions, and we would like to balance our relatively high fixed cost with the recurring revenue streams. This is of course a process we cannot change for purely a trading venue to a revenue-driven, recurring revenue-driven company, but the first effects of the strategy are still visible. In terms of data, we are growing 7.5% year on year, so it shows that this recurring revenues are increasing, and hopefully we will balance and those recurring revenues and our fixed costs, so we will decrease our operational leverage.
Poland decided to build or establish its own Polish rating agency. So what is happening with this project?
Rating agency is a JV, joint venture, including Polish Development Fund. It's a kind of sovereign fund. BIG, it's a banking credit scoring agency, which is owned by the Polish banks, both private and state control. And Warsaw Stock Exchange, we submitted a request to ESMA for a registration. Few days ago, ESMA decided not to give the registration. The reason for that was not the full implementation of their concerns regarding independence of the agency, which we received by the end of April. It was related to our corporate governance, so the structure of decision-making process, and we are fully committed to implement all the recommended actions by ESMA, and we hope that we'll be registered soon after we have all the procedures and different style of corporate governments in place.
With the current rating of Polish economy, is a legitimate question: why do we need a local rating agency if the ratings are excellent anyway?
Yeah, Poland is a country with excellent rating. Our blue chip companies have very good ratings from top 3 rating agencies. The issue is with the small and medium-sized companies. They cannot afford to be rated by the top agencies. So we aim for this market, and this complementary initiative to our bond market, what I mentioned also previously, that to make a vivid bonds market, we have to classification of the risk profile of the companies, especially those smaller ones. So there will be relatively lower rating for those who are have the higher probability of default, and those will have to compensate this risk to the investors with the higher coupon, and those with high credit worthiness, so low probability of default, will benefit with the lower cost of capital, so lower coupon, and this will give a portfolio investor, institutional investors, an overview of the risk classes, and without that we cannot build up our DCM, debt capital market.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And that was it for tonight's Poland Daily Business.
Hello, and welcome again to Poland Daily Business Weather. Tomorrow the forecast should bring showers in the north, southwest, and central regions of the country. The cities of Kraków, Kielce, and Katowice can expect thunderstorms. In Europe, the western Mediterranean regions will see clear skies and a temperature of 34 degrees in Athens. Northern Europe will see mostly rain, with Dublin and Oslo being the coldest places with a temperature of 19 degrees. Moscow can expect thunderstorms and a temperature of 21 degrees. That is all for tonight. I wish you all a very pleasant evening.
Dobry wieczór Państwu, Emilia Pobłocka, witam bardzo serdecznie.
Good evening, my name is Emilia Pobłocka. I'd like to warmly welcome you. Our meeting place is very special, especially for my guest. She is the world-famous opera singer, mezzo-soprano, and director of the Warsaw Chamber Opera, Mrs. Alicja Węgorzewska.
Good evening.
So it's thanks to you that the media started to take notice of the Warsaw Chamber Opera.
They noticed indeed. Today we were on the stage in the Warsaw Chamber Opera. That is, as I said, a magical place and a unique front for Warsaw. But unfortunately, black clouds have been hanging over this place lately. For some time, you can observe media campaigns of a more negative nature. I was accused of destroying the opera, yet we are talking about reviving the place. It's crucial to diagnose the problem in depth, but the easiest way to describe it would be liquidation and destruction of heritage. There's a mission with which I came here to do. And I dare say that it is a cultural mission. It is the mission to put the Warsaw Chamber Opera on the highest pedestal. It's a promotion of this amazing place. I pay great acknowledgement to the past and the achievements of the Warsaw Chamber Opera with a great nod. However, the general audiences have their own opinion, and the room of this great opera has been in great detriment lately. If there's only 150 seats and you cannot fill the room, it means there is a problem.
What is the rate of the ticket sales?
It sometimes reaches 50%, that is, 70 sold, with big parts of the place left empty. Even the sold tickets goes to friends and families of the performers. However, there is a lack of new products, lacking freshness.
To jest piękne, że opera na przykład wystawia 24 opery Mozarta, ale wystawiała.
It is beautiful that the opera, for example, exhibited 24 Mozart operas, but you have to regard it as a thing of the past because the decorations were long destroyed and the costumes were incorrectly stored. Besides, the audience cannot stand the same show running 20-30 years.
Już to przestaje być dla niej po prostu interesujące.
So the Warsaw Chamber Opera needed to undergo radical changes for it to keep functioning.
Bolesnych, ale również chcemy ukierunkować.
Painful changes. We also want to direct the opera to have a Baroque classicist profile, so it absolutely should be Mozart and Baroque works being played in the halls, those that were rarely performed in Poland. We want to be unique on the European market.
Ale chcemy być unikatem na rynku europejskim.
Did you expect, as the director of the Warsaw Chamber Opera, to be met with such resistant and negative campaign? Did the thought ever occur to you, why me?
Co mi to było?
This question is very interesting, and recently I have had the thought several times. What was it all for?
Do your friends ask you these questions?
Dziennikarz jeden mnie ostatnio zapytał, mówi:
A journalist once asked, why am I running the Masovian Musical Theatre when I already have all the public spotlight? Well, this is a mission, the next step in life and taking on new challenges. I cannot imagine a moment of stagnation.
Wyzwań. Nie wyobrażam sobie takiego momentu, że jest stagnacja.
I'm happy in developing. It is development not only on a personal level, but also a great contribution to the development of Polish culture.
Wielki wkład, mam nadzieję, w rozwój polskiej kultury.
Fantesio e posseder dovrà vedrò per amore unito un file oggetto me destò un affetto che per me poi non ha, che per me poi non ha. Vedrò il mio sospiro c'è un servo mio, vedrò che un ben ch'io desio ei posseder dovrà. Vedrò per man amore unita un vile oggetto che me destò un affetto che per me poi non ha, che per me poi non ha. Vedrò a non mi lasciarti in pace, non può questo concetto. Tu non nascesti autate, tu non nascesti autate per dare a me tormento e forse ancor per ridere la infelicità. C'ha la speranza sola delle vendette mie, quest'anima consola
Dziękuję pani za rozmowę.
Thank you very much for the interview. Thank you for bringing us into the world of opera, which is a beautiful and a magical place. But to experience it, you have to come and see it for yourself.
Alicja Węgorzewska, dyrektor Warszawy.
Our guest was Alicja Węgorzewska, the director of the Warsaw Chamber of Opera. Thank you so very much for joining us, and see you again.
This is the wall to those who fell in the Warsaw Uprising at the Warsaw Uprising Museum. Today, we meet a remarkable man, 10 when the Second World War broke out, 12 when he joined the underground, 13 when he was tortured by the Gestapo, 15 when he took part in the Warsaw Uprising itself. This is the remarkable story of Professor Julian Kulski. Join me on Poland Daily History as we look at this remarkable man's story and his remarkable life. So, Professor, what you're really saying, you're being very charitable, I think, to today's youth in the sense that we can't recreate the conditions of warfare, so it's hardly surprising that they are find ideas more frightening than you found bullets and hand grenades, probably. But also, while you've been in America, you've done a lot of work, I think, to better Polish-American relations and encourage this.
I have maintained contact with Poland since 1960. I was 15 when I left my parents. I was 30 when I came back for the first time to Warsaw and Soviet. It was under Russian occupation. It was horrible. And I didn't stay long, and I was working for the World Bank, so I had to get back to Washington. But what was your question?
No, I'm just saying that you've done a lot of work to create good relations between America and the United States. Between Poland and the United States.
I was very busy. I tried to whatever I could. For example, I was interested in having Poland join the rejoin the World Bank at one time, but the Russians wouldn't allow it, because I was hoping at least for economic independence.
Yes.
If the political. So I talked about it with Jaruzelski whenever I was traveling, crossing. I would always stop in Poland on the way on my international travel. And but I was very busy as an architect. I was a professor, I was dean at 3 universities, I wrote books, and I was also a full-time member of the World Bank, traveling around the globe, building buildings. So I didn't have too much time to do, except for there were a couple of exceptions, do anything for Poland. But as soon as Poland became independent, I offered my services as an architect and city planner and came here 30 years ago for 3 months to do a regional plan of Pomorze. Okay. And all the hotels which were falling down, like the Grand Hotel in Sopot.
Yes.
And I found investors who were interested in Poland, but so I tried to do everything I could. Also, whenever I was staying here for a couple of weeks longer than usual, the Polish government asked me to make a movie my story for Polish television. It was during the Jaruzelski's reign. And I did that, although it was January and I didn't have winter clothes and I was freezing. But it was an excellent film, but then Jaruzelski a year later declared the war on Solidarity and destroyed the film.
It's a pity.
It was a waste of time. So I basically retired 30 years ago as an architect. I was able to devote all my efforts for Poland and for Polish-American relations. Poland and America I owe 2 particularly big gratitude. Poland for creating me whom I am and giving me the opportunity to fight for Poland. And America, as far as my profession, to become a world-known architect, which I would never even been able to do if I stayed in Poland. So I'm interested in maintaining contact between Poland and America, and I feel that we're not close enough. Britain and America are very close because of the language, of course, but I'm interested in so far, I feel America is not doing its part. Poland is doing more, sending soldiers to fight American wars, and I think the government is at fault for not telling the whole story and requiring America to do tit for tat.
Yes, but it must give you I'm sure it does, immense satisfaction that, you know, you can go back, you'd think you're way back to the outbreak of the Warsaw Uprising in which you fought. And here we are very many years later, some would say far too many years later, but to be sitting again in a free and independent Poland. I mean, you must feel that the battle you fought, you actually, although you were defeated militarily after 63 days, in actual fact the battle was won ultimately.
Well, I've always felt that my friends who shed blood and died during the uprising did not die in vain. And then I saw Solidarity movement, which carrying it on. And just as we were brought up, I was brought up on the tradition of the 19th century uprising, the Solidarity used that. And I think this is one of the few countries that really respects veterans to this degree.
Yes.
I mean, every year there's a big to-do in Warsaw. The traffic stopped on 5 o'clock on
That's
the 1st
right.
of September. And I wish this would happen more in Britain and in America. In America in particular, American veterans that I speak to all the time are not appreciated the way that we members of the uprising are.
No, that's something we should ponder. You're right that veterans are
So
treated.
it's a wonderful opportunity at my age, and I'm 90 years old, to be recognized for what I did, not only in the uprising and during the occupation, but since there for Poland. But I'm a little frustrated because the governments don't listen to me.
No, well.
I'm being an American, I know what is required, but they send diplomats who are not experienced and they're lost in the Washington. So both I and my wife try to help the ambassadors as much as possible, but it takes a big effort on the part of the government here. For example, Poland is the only country in Europe that doesn't have a lobbying firm, American firm.
Oh, right, okay.
Georgia has 6, Britain, France, and Germany have numbers, and Poland is the only country in Europe that refuses to hire an American firm.
That's interesting.
Public relations, and also lobbying. Lobbying is a bad.
But well, it has a bad connotation in this part of the world. But Professor, thank you very much for you're doing your bit. I can see that you're doing.
But I can't do. I'm not a.
But
I
I'm
feel
sure.
like Don Quixote
Yes, but I think for many years you've been doing more than many people.
Yeah.
It's been an immense privilege to share your reminiscences here in this museum, which is a museum to you, in fact, and your comrades. So thank you very much for sharing this. It's been fascinating. We've been honoured to have you on the programme. And for those of you who would like to read this excellent book, The Colour of Courage by Professor Kalisz, it's a fantastic diary of his time, the time we've been talking about today, his as a young child fighting in the Warsaw Uprising, and I can recommend it. So please go and read it. Thank you.
The Warsaw Uprising began on the 1st of August, 1944. 0 hour, or W hour, as they called it, was supposed to be at 5 o'clock. But the first outbreak of shooting began earlier in the day at Żoliborz, the northern suburb of Warsaw. That encounter, which began at 1:30 p.m., was the first skirmish of the Warsaw Uprising. As the saying goes, much has been written. Was it a good idea? Was it launched at the right time? Were there other opportunities? You may well ask. The fact remains that it did take place, and the people who took part in it were brave and beautiful. in the annals of uprisings against tyrannical rule. The Warsaw Uprising is unsurpassed. For 63 days, the Poles waited for the Russians to come across the river from the east and aid them in their rebellion against the Nazis. This did not happen. History has told us why. The Russians were quite happy to watch the Poles be destroyed by the Germans, rather than for the Poles to be free after World War II. There is no doubt about this. This was Stalin's plan. The Warsaw Uprising is indelible on the memory of the 20th century. At the Warsaw Uprising Museum, this history is set in stark terms. You're able to take a close look at those 63 days of fighting for freedom. This is an experience that will not leave you untouched. It will change the way you think about history of this time. And it will remind you of what a great capital Warsaw actually is. The city that stood against one of the greatest tyrannies the world has ever seen and rose again to become a modern leading city in Europe. The next series of episodes will take you through the history of the Warsaw Uprising. Thanks for watching.
Hi, I'm Ola, and we are back at the Warsaw Uprising Museum, and I'd like you to see something special. This is the Heartfire Museum, which beats exactly 63 times a minute to commemorate 63 days of the Warsaw Rising. We need to remember that the Warsaw Rising militarily was against Germans, but politically it was against Soviets, who were standing just on the other side of the Vistula River and wanted to liberate Warsaw capital. But they eventually never did it when we were here during the Warsaw Rising.
Okay, Ola, what are we looking at here?
Well, I'd like to show you insurgent armbands that were worn by the participants of the Warsaw Rising. They wore them on the right armband all through the time of the Warsaw Rising. Of course, we need to remember that these armbands are in the color of the Polish national flag, and white evokes freedom, purity, red, this is martyrdom, blood, so Polish national flag is very, very symbolic, yes? We need to remember that after 5 years of very difficult terror imposed on our community, finally we are allowed to plant our national standard in the walls of Warsaw. So we are so happy that finally we are free, yes? And in fact, those 2 months of the Warsaw Rising were the only 2 months of freedom in between 1939 and 1989. So imagine how hilarious, yes, it was for us. And of course, we need to remember that Warsaw Rising happened in different parts of the city, yes, it took place, in fact. Our positions were encircled by Germans. Some houses would be attacked many times by German units, and the problem was that Hitler asked SS units to finish off the Poles here, so many outlaws, criminals, rapists were called up here and fought here for a promised pardon. So,
so they emptied their prisons to fight here.
Yeah, so
interesting. I hadn't heard that.
So scenes of barbarity.
So it truly was a criminal enterprise.
Yeah,
what the Nazis did. Yeah.
Unfortunately, and it's not that well known still, even in 2019.
I read about it. I read a lot about the uprising. But not as much as you, of course, but I had never read that.
Yeah, so we need to remember about that, because piles of corpses would reach up to the second floor, yes. Everything was burnt on the stop not to leave traces behind, but traces left behind. And for example, after the war, we found 12 tons of human ashes lying here inside the city of Warsaw. So imagine, even nowadays when we construct something, we come across human ashes.
So in a sense, you might say that the city had become a sort of bizarre concentration camp of its own.
Yeah, unfortunately.
I had never thought about that, but when you put it this way...
That was indeed.
And here they are. One thing I wanted to say was, I wanted to bring out was we said before they didn't have uniforms.
Yeah.
But they had the armband. That was the uniform. That's what united. You could tell who somebody was with the armband, right?
Yeah.
And that was another purpose of it, right? And what does it say on it? It says.
So, for example, we have the armband of Tadeusz Komorowski, codename Boar. So we need to remember that every
He was the head guy, wasn't
he? Yeah, the chief commander of the whole army, and the code name was needed because in conspiracy you could not use your real name and your surname. Yes, that's why they.
Because you might be captured and tortured, and then you could immediately
say,
give up the person's
who's
name.
My friend,
yeah. Whereas if you knew the code name, there's nothing you could do.
Yeah.
And once the Germans knew that, they knew there was no point to kill you because you really didn't know.
Yeah.
Except
but still,
the
they
code name.
tortured us.
But they would do it anyway.
Severely. Yeah.
That was the idea. There is that.
It never ended.
Yeah. The also, each of these, there were different cadres or groups or units throughout the city. Now, how many people were usually in a unit, and what did a unit contain?
Well, it's dependent. Generally, we need to remember that at the start of the rising, there were 35,000 insurgents against 20,000 Germans. Yes.
Okay.
So, and there were, as you said, there were lots of units composed of people who were either volunteers, but generally these were people who were preparing for the rising all through the years of World War II. So this was not a novelty for them, yes? They knew how to use weapons, they knew how to throw grenades and stuff like that. Yeah? So they were already prepared, yes. The problem was that
they'd been training during this time, There was always aiming, they just didn't know when it would be. Yeah. But at the moment of liberation from the Soviet, the Allied, supposed liberation from Soviet and Allied armies, there would be this uprising. And it took place, they just didn't get the support, which was the point. Okay, more from Poland Daily Travel with Alexandra and with me will add to the Warsaw Uprising Museum. We'll be right back.